So, my dears, this is part 2, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the fine pickle that King Agamemnon walked back into when he returned to Greece. Now, he himself was bringing some pretty terrible things with him. Physically, he was bringing with him Cassandra, one of the princesses of Troy, his mistress, and this was hardly likely to please his wife Clytemnestra, who had been up to no good on her own. 10 years, after all, apart is a bit of a temptation. But worse still, Agamemnon was bringing back the terrible story of the death of their daughter, his daughter with Clytemnestra, before the departure of the fleet to Troy. And Iphigenia, their daughter, he sacrificed in order to get a wind. The reasons for his doing this are long and complicated, but he had offended the goddess, and he had the only way to redeem himself, according to Calchas the seer, the prophet who was going off to Troy with the expedition, was in fact to sacrifice his daughter. So in a truly horrible sequence of events, he told her, his daughter, that she was going to be married to the great warrior Achilles. Little did she know, as she moved towards the altar, that it was her own funeral that she was moving towards, and she was killed on that altar. And they did get a wind, and Agamemnon was certainly in a position to plead that what could he do? They had been languishing there for so long that the fleet, the many kings of Greece who had come together to help to fulfill their vows, to their pledge to support King Menelaus and King Agamemnon, they had pledged to support them, and here they were being asked to come and rescue Menelaus' wife Helen, and they agreed, but there they sat waiting for a wind, and no wind came, and all their stores were rotting, and they were at each other's throats, and if they didn't sail, they would never sail again, they would never come back, and it would disgrace the part of the Mediterranean. It would disgrace the Greek world if they did not seek to avenge the kidnapping of Helen. So what was Agamemnon to do? Could have been his answer. But of course, for his wife, there would never be an excuse. And what she did was, while Agamemnon was away at Troy, she slept with his first cousin, and there was much more to that than meets the eye, because they all belong to the most dysfunctional family in the history of Greek myth, possibly in the history of the world. It will take you a very long time to read about it in detail, but it begins with a man called Tantalus, who was skeptical about the power of the gods, although he was very popular with them. He invited them to dinner and served up his son Pelops in a stew to see if they could tell the difference between human flesh and animal flesh. Well, for the most part they could, with the exception of the goddess Demeter, who was so preoccupied with the fate of her daughter Persephone, who was currently in hell, not at her own request or demand. And she thoughtlessly ate a piece of Pelops' shoulder, but everybody else went, ugh, and they arrested Tantalus, who was sentenced to a terrible fate. He sits to this day in hell, in a pool of water which shrinks away when he tries to sip from it. And above him is a bough hanging with gorgeous fruit, which raises up so that he can't reach it when he tries to get something to eat. That was his fate, is his fate. An appropriate vengeance, as you'll see, because banquets, eaten and uneaten, form an enormous part of this dysfunctional genealogy, as they should in all primitive societies where food is much more than merely food. So what happened to Pelops himself? Well, he was reconstituted by the goddess Demeter, whose negligence had permitted her to take a bite out of his shoulder, and with the help, I think, if I'm remembering rightly, of Hephaestus, the Olympian engineer, he acquired a shoulder bone made of ivory, or a piece of his shoulder made of ivory, and went on to have an inglorious career of his own, in which he conspired with another person. If you read about the life of Pelops, you'll see that there are many possible volunteers for this role, to beat the father of his would-be beloved in a chariot race, despite the fact that his would-be father-in-law had Zeus working for him in the chariot race, but Pelops had Poseidon Earthshaker, working for him, and he won the race. But retaliation there was, and always is, in stories of brutality and vendetta, and indeed that retaliation is what ultimately the three plays, of which you're reading the first, the Agamemnon, are about. So Pelops' sons got themselves into further trouble. They killed their half-brother of theirs, Chrysippus, and they were sent into exile. And after a long story of journeying and betraying and killing and battle, in the end, Atreus discovered that Thyestes had been sleeping with his wife, and he served up, guess what he did? Yes, in revenge, he served up Thyestes' children to Thyestes in a stew. Reading Greek mythology makes you very dubious about ever eating a stew, and quite right too, because you don't know what's really in a stew. So in this stew were Thyestes' children, and so the revenge took a while in coming. Thyestes' surviving son, Aegisthus, is the man with whom Clytemnestra has been sleeping, and he is indeed the first cousin of Agamemnon. Agamemnon and Menelaus were Atreus' sons, but the curse was still coming around, and it comes around in this play, where Agamemnon is made to suffer for having sacrificed one of his own daughters in order to get a wind to get to Troy. Iphigenia, poor thing, dies in the cause of rescuing her aunt, Helen. So back comes Agamemnon, and as you'll see at the beginning of our play, the watchman gets the news by fire that Troy has fallen, and lo and behold, in comes Agamemnon in his chariot. Quite an event, quite a staggering event in the history of drama. On comes somebody in a chariot. This is supposed to be a world of a chorus and a protagonist, and in fact, AESCHYLUS, our first genius of theatre, had added a second actor, so we could have a protagonist and an antagonist, and the possibility of having two on stage was already a staggering development for drama. These two actors could play all the characters in the cast, as long as there were only two of them on stage and the chorus at any one time. And so on comes Agamemnon, and Cassandra, his mistress, is left there in the chariot, standing there as Agamemnon goes in with his wife on a red carpet that she rolls out for him, which he should not, if he was a smart fellow, have trodden on, because this is hubris, overweening pride, one of the fatal aspects that Aristotle describes as being the determining factor in a tragedy. The unfortunate tragic hero is a little too concerned with himself and his own ends, and Agamemnon thinks, quite right, I'll walk on a red carpet? Damn yes. So he does, and he goes in through the great doors that I've described at the back of the stage, and the doors close, and Cassandra starts to scream, because she is gifted with second sight, with prophecy. She is a prophet, but she has been cursed by the gods never to be listened to, never to have anyone take her prophecy seriously. So she's alone on stage in one of the great dramatic coups of world theatre ever, and there it is at the very dawn of theatre. We see what is happening off stage through her vision of it, and yet no one believes her. An extraordinary double whammy of indirection. the stage being used to describe something that's off stage, and the stage being used to show how we fail to listen. So you'll see what occurs. The great doors open, and we are shown Agamemnon's body, and trouble is afoot at the end of this play. As you will see if you read about it, Agamemnon's son, Orestes, comes back to avenge his father along with his sister Electra. They do so. They kill both their mother, not a good development in the saga, and Aegisthus, their uncle, cousin, mother's lover, so then the Furies, the embodiment of vengeance and justice, arrive and pursue Orestes around the known world until finally he returns to plead with Athena, goddess of wisdom, resident goddess of Athens, for some help, and she provides it in the last play of the Oresteia trilogy, which installs, in place of vendetta, a court. And this symbolic of what a city can bring to a world, to a culture, this is Aeschylus's underlying purpose, to show that culture and civilization can be embodied in 12 men and women and good people and true, although in fact in this archetypal first lawsuit, it takes the intervention, there's a 6-to-6 tie, of the goddess to come down finally and rule in favor of freeing Orestes from the curse, and finally relieving the house of Tantalus, the house of Pelops, the house of Atreus, of its terrible legacy. That's what these plays are about, and that's what you'll see here. You'll see the watchman get the news. He's essentially a comic character, and you'll see that 2,000 years later, Shakespeare takes the same approach to how is he going to unfold the story of Prince Hamlet. Well, we're on the battlements with the ordinary people, working people, like the watchman. This seems to have been an intuition of Aeschylus's which has endured for 2,500 years, of how you start the story. So we move on to Clytemnestra herself, the queen, who is not the most popular person with the chorus. The chorus are composed of all the old men who couldn't be recruited because they were too old. Everybody else had to go and fight in the assault on Troy. So they are left behind, and they have seen what she has done, and in the name of the king, their master, they give her a very hard time. And then a herald arrives, news, my lord, from Troy, and he's able to bring us in a huge speech that anticipates so many such speeches in the last 2,500 years on the stage. And then in, very promptly, comes Agamemnon with his mistress, and things proceed to a horrible climax. And so here you have a play about the gruesomeness of human nature, and that is what is presented to the audience in Athens, and it continues to be presented. We continue to understand that the Greek playwrights, the best of them certainly, did see through into the terrible power of the human heart to pervert ordinary morality and to do the most terrible things. And why should we want to go to the theatre and see this? Well, this is a question that I might have to ask you. They go on being performed, these plays. They are written in language of great beauty, but not many of us speak enough ancient Greek to appreciate that. So I commend to you the Richmond Lattimore translation and the Robin Bond translation, both of which I've written to you about. You need a good translation in order to appreciate the poetic majesty of this play above all others that were written at the time, but this play and the others in the great pantheon of Athenian tragedy. So I hope you will enjoy, as I hope you enjoyed the Antigone of Sophocles, the next in line of the great Greek playwrights. and I will speak to you soon. Goodbye, my dears.